Have you ever been destroyed so thoroughly by someone that you couldn't stop thinking about them afterward?
Tonight's story is about a debate tournament.
A captain who wielded words like weapons, and the moment I realized that humiliation and obsession are sometimes the same thing.
If you want to hear uncensored, too hot for YouTube stories, check out my Patreon in the description below. If you're ready, let's begin.
Maren Hollis wrote my name in the fog on her dorm window at 2 in the morning, and I know this because her roommate told mine, who told me while I was trying to pretend I didn't care. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me go back to the beginning, to the moment she first made me want to disappear, and also never leave her sight. Before we continue, comment below where in the world you are watching from, and please click like and subscribe for more GL stories. The Northeast Regional Debate Championship took place in March in a liberal arts college so aggressively New England that even the coffee shop had exposed brick and a chalkboard menu written in perfect cursive. I was a junior, captain of my own mediocre team, and I had spent 6 weeks preparing for this tournament like it was the only thing standing between me and total irrelevance. My partner Becca kept saying I was taking it too seriously, but Becca also thought wearing mismatched socks to rounds was a personality trait, so I wasn't listening. Maren's team won regionals the year before. She was a senior, pre-law, president of 3 campus organizations I couldn't get into, and she had a reputation for making grown men cry during cross-examination. I'd seen her twice before at smaller tournaments. Once, she smiled at me across a hotel conference room while eviscerating my friend's case so completely that he switched his major the following semester. The second time, she held a door open for me, said something about the weather, and I forgot how to pronounce my own name for the next 20 minutes. She was tall, which I hated because I was not, and she had dark blonde hair she wore in a low bun that looked effortless, but absolutely was not. I knew this because I'd tried the same bun 17 times in my mirror and looked like I was either going to a funeral or had just woken up. On her, it looked like a choice, the kind of pulled-together aesthetic that made you feel like you were always slightly underdressed in comparison. She wore thin gold rings, 3 of them, and wire-rimmed glasses she only put on when she was reading evidence cards, which meant you knew she was about to ruin your life before she even started speaking. Our first round pairing was announced Friday night. Becca saw the bracket before I did and said, "Oh no." I looked over her shoulder at the screen and felt my stomach do something gymnastic and unpleasant. We were hitting Maren's team in the second round Saturday morning. "We can beat them," I said. "Liar," Becca said. She was right, but I wasn't about to admit it. I spent that entire night rereading our case files, checking sources, running through rebuttals for arguments Maren's team probably wouldn't even make, because I had no idea what they'd actually prepared, and panic made me thorough. Becca fell asleep on top of her laptop at midnight. I kept going until 3. And when I finally tried to sleep, I dreamed about Maren taking apart my entire case with one sentence, and then asking me if I needed a tissue. The round started at 9. The room was small, overheated, and smelled like dry erase markers and someone's overly aggressive vanilla body spray. The judge was a law professor with the kind of face that suggested she'd rather be literally anywhere else. Maren walked in 4 minutes late, which should have been unprofessional, but instead felt like an entrance. She set her bag down, looked at me, and said, "Good morning." Her voice was warm, almost friendly, and I said good morning back like a normal person, which I was proud of until I realized I'd been staring at her hands while I said it. Her partner was a junior named Simone, sharp-eyed and quick with evidence. But everyone knew Maren ran the show. I could feel her watching me during our opening statement. Not in an aggressive way, just this steady, evaluating attention that made the back of my neck feel warm. I told myself it was nerves. I told myself I was reading into things. I told myself to focus. Our case was about digital privacy, corporate liability, something I'd spent weeks researching and genuinely cared about. I thought we had a good angle. We didn't. Maren stood for her cross-examination and smiled, the kind of smile you give someone right before you tell them their parking meter expired. She adjusted her glasses, looked down at her notes, and then back at me. "Can you define reasonable expectation of privacy for the court?" she asked. I could. I did. She nodded, wrote something down. "And in your framework, who determines what's reasonable?" I explained. She nodded again, and I started to think maybe this wouldn't be so bad. Then she said, "So if I'm understanding your position correctly, you're arguing that user consent is meaningless if the terms of service are longer than 3 pages, which would mean that essentially no digital platform currently operating could claim valid consent. Is that an accurate summary of your case?" It was not an accurate summary of my case. It was a weaponized distortion of my case, phrased so carefully that if I said yes, I was endorsing a position I didn't actually hold, and if I said no, I'd sound like I didn't understand my own argument. I tried to clarify. She let me talk for about 30 seconds and then said, "I'm going to stop you there, because I think we're getting into the weeds and the judge's time is valuable." The judge's time. Like I was wasting it. Like I was the problem. She pivoted, asked 3 more questions that all had the same trap inside them, and by the time she sat down, I'd accidentally agreed that my own framework was functionally unenforceable, which meant our entire case collapsed on itself. Becca looked at me like I'd just set our research on fire. I wanted to argue that Maren had done something unfair, but she hadn't. She'd just been better. Surgically, devastatingly better. Their rebuttal was worse. Maren stood again and spent 8 minutes calmly explaining why every piece of evidence we'd cited either didn't say what we claimed or actively contradicted our position. She did this without raising her voice, without sarcasm, without anything that would have let me feel justifiably angry. She was polite. She was thorough. She was so competent it felt like violence. At one point, she said, "I think their hearts are in the right place, but intention doesn't replace rigor." And I watched the judge nod, and I realized with perfect clarity that we had lost not just the round but any shred of credibility I'd thought I had. We lost. Badly. The kind of loss where the judge doesn't even bother giving you feedback because what would be the point? Maren packed her bag, shook my hand, said, "Good round," with the kind of sincerity that made me want to throw something, and left. Becca and I sat in that room for 10 minutes after everyone else had gone. She said, "That was brutal." I said, "I know." She said, "Are you okay?" I said yes, which was a lie, because what I actually was furious and humiliated, and somehow more aware of Maren than I'd been of anyone in my entire life. I wanted to hate her. I tried to hate her. But when I closed my eyes that night, what I saw wasn't the argument or the loss. It was the way her hand moved when she gestured, the tilt of her head when she listened, the exact angle of her jaw when she made a point I couldn't counter. I told myself this was just my brain processing defeat. I told myself it didn't mean anything. I was wrong. The tournament had a mixer that night, which was a generous term for warm wine and cheese cubes in a room with fluorescent lights, and a motivational poster about teamwork. I wasn't going to go. Becca made me. She said I couldn't hide in the dorm like a wounded animal, and I told her that was exactly what wounded animals did, and it was a solid evolutionary strategy, but she dragged me there anyway. Maren was near the back of the room, talking to 2 other debaters I vaguely recognized. She saw me walk in. I know she saw me, because she looked directly at me for half a second, and then looked away, which somehow felt worse than if she'd stared. I got a plastic cup of wine that tasted like it had been sitting out since the Clinton administration and tried to look like I had somewhere to be. Becca was talking to someone from Boston College about the ethics of using Wikipedia as a citation source, which meant I was alone, which meant I was visibly alone at a social function after getting destroyed in front of my peers earlier that day. I considered faking a migraine. Then Maren walked over. I didn't see her coming because I was staring very intently at a bulletin board advertising a campus blood drive, but I heard her voice behind me. "You're Iris, right?" I turned around, almost spilled my wine, did not spill my wine, and said, "Yes." She smiled, and it wasn't the smile from the debate round. It was something softer, a little curious. I wanted to say, "I thought your opening was really solid. The research was thorough." I stared at her. This felt like a trap. "We lost." "You did," she said. "But that doesn't mean the research wasn't good. Your angle on corporate liability was interesting. If you'd structured your framework differently, it could have been really compelling." I didn't know what to say. Thank you felt absurd. Agreeing felt worse. I settled on, "You dismantled it in about 4 minutes." "6," she said, "and only because your definitions were too broad. If you tighten your scope, the argument holds." She took a sip from her own cup, made a face at the taste, and added, "This wine is undrinkable." "It's from a box," I said, because apparently I was now the kind of person who made small talk about bad wine with someone who had publicly humiliated me 6 hours earlier. That explains it. She set her cup down on a nearby table and leaned against the wall, arms crossed. She was wearing a sweater that looked soft and expensive, charcoal gray, pushed up at the sleeves. I realized I was staring at her forearms and redirected my gaze to her face, which did not help. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "About my case." She tilted her head slightly. "Because you're going to face people worse than me, and I'd rather you know how to beat them." "Worse than you?" "At debate," she clarified. "I like to think I'm relatively kind in most other contexts." I didn't know if she was flirting or just being friendly or if I was losing my mind. Probably the third one. I said, "You told the judge my framework was unenforceable." "It was," she said. "But it didn't have to be. That's the point." We stood there for a moment, and I tried to figure out what was happening. She was talking to me like we were colleagues, like this morning's round had been a professional exchange, and not the worst experience of my competitive academic career. I wanted to ask why she was being nice. I wanted to ask if she always did this after rounds, if this was some kind of weird debate team dominance ritual I wasn't aware of. I wanted to ask why I couldn't stop looking at the shape of her mouth when she talked. Instead, I said, "I don't think I can take advice from someone who just annihilated me." She laughed, and the sound did something to my nervous system that I was not prepared for. "Fair enough. Consider it unsolicited feedback then." She pushed off the wall, picked up her terrible wine again, and added, "For what it's worth, I don't usually give feedback to people I don't think are worth the effort." Then she walked away, back toward her team, and I stood there holding my plastic cup like an idiot, trying to figure out if I'd just been complimented or condescended to, and why both options made my pulse feel loud. Becca appeared at my elbow 2 minutes later. "Did Maren Hollis just talk to you?" "Apparently." "What did she say?" "That my case structure was bad, but fixable." "Wow," Becca said. "That's so nice of her. I kind of hate her." I laughed, but the sound felt hollow. I didn't hate her. That was the problem. The rest of the weekend was a blur of rounds I barely remember and losses I'm trying to forget. We placed dead last in our bracket. Maren's team won the tournament, and during the award ceremony she gave a speech about preparation and persistence that everyone applauded. We drove home Sunday afternoon. Becca fell asleep in the passenger seat. I spent 3 hours on the highway trying to convince myself that I was not developing a deeply inconvenient fixation on a woman who had beaten me so thoroughly I'd probably have flashbacks every time I heard the phrase, reasonable expectation of privacy. I failed. Back on campus, life returned to its usual rhythm. Classes, assignments, debate practice, Thursday pasta at the dining hall. I threw myself into reworking our case, restructuring the framework the way Maren had suggested, without admitting that's what I was doing. Becca noticed and said, "You're taking this really seriously." And I told her that was the point of being on a competitive team. I did not think about Maren constantly. I thought about her frequently, which was different, and also a lie. I thought about the way she'd looked at me during cross-examination, the way she'd smiled at the mixer, the offhand comment about effort. I checked her university's debate team's social media, which made me feel like a stalker, so I stopped, and then started again 2 days later. 3 weeks after regionals, I got an email. The message was short, professional. She was organizing a workshop for debaters in the region, covering advanced argumentation, framework construction, cross-examination strategy. She'd invited 15 people. I was one of them. The workshop was in 2 weeks, at her campus. Lunch provided. RSVP by Friday. I read it 4 times. Then I forwarded it to Becca with no comment. She called me immediately. "Are you going?" "I don't know." "Liar," she said. "You've already decided." She was right, but I made her argue with me about it for 20 minutes anyway. I RSVP'd that night. Maren responded 6 hours later with a one-line confirmation and a smiley face emoji, which felt so incongruous with her whole competent professional debate captain persona that I stared at my phone trying to reconcile it. The 2 weeks passed slowly. I had midterms and a research paper and zero extra time to spend obsessing over a workshop that was probably just going to be 4 hours of people talking about theory. I told myself I was going for the educational value. I told myself this was networking. I told myself to stop lying. The workshop was on a Saturday. I drove up alone because Becca had a family thing, and also because I didn't want to witness to whatever was about to happen. The drive took 90 minutes, which gave me plenty of time to question every decision that had led me to this moment. Maren's campus was smaller than mine, old brick buildings and tree-lined paths, the kind of place that showed up in glossy brochures under the heading Academic Excellence in a Historic Setting. I parked and sat in my car for 5 minutes doing breathing exercises, which felt pathetic, but also necessary. The workshop was in the Student Center, second floor, a room with large windows that looked out over the quad. 12 of us showed up. I recognized a few faces from the tournament circuit. No one I knew well. Maren was at the front of the room, setting up a projector, wearing dark jeans and a white button-down with the sleeves rolled up. Her hair was down today, falling just past her shoulders. She had reading glasses perched on top of her head. She looked up when I walked in, and her expression did something I couldn't quite read. Then she smiled and said, "Iris, I'm glad you made it." I said something back. Probably hello or thank you. I genuinely don't remember because my brain was busy cataloging the small scar near her left eyebrow and the way her hands moved when she gestured toward an empty seat near the front. The room filled slowly. Maren greeted everyone by name, made small talk easily, asked people about their spring break plans and recent tournament performances. She was good at this, making everyone feel welcome without being overly familiar. When everyone had arrived, she pulled her glasses down and suddenly looked older, more serious. "Thank you all for coming. I know Saturdays are valuable, so I'm going to try to make this worth your time." Her presentation started with a clip from a Supreme Court oral argument, Scalia grilling a lawyer so mercilessly you could see the moment the poor guy realized he'd lost. Then she broke down exactly what Scalia had done, the linguistic traps, the rhetorical framing, the way he'd used the lawyer's own words against him. "This," she said, "is what good cross-examination looks like. Notice he never raises his voice. He doesn't need to. The questions do the work." She walked us through more examples, each one a masterclass in controlled aggression. Then she showed us a clip from her own tournament rounds, including the one where she'd destroyed me. She didn't name me, but several people in the room had been there. I felt their glances, tried to keep my face neutral. On screen, past me was explaining my framework, and I could hear the exact moment my definition got too broad. "This is a good debater," she said, and I appreciated the lie. Strong research, clear delivery, genuine passion for the topic. But watch what happens when the framework isn't tight enough. She played her cross-examination. Watching it back was worse than living it the first time. When the clip ended, she said, "The lesson here isn't that you should never take risks with your framework. It's that if you're going to build something ambitious, you need to know exactly where the weak points are before someone else finds them." It was the kindest possible framing of my complete humiliation. During the break, someone asked her if she ever felt bad about destroying people's arguments so thoroughly. She laughed and said, "All the time, but debate is preparation for a world that won't be kind to you. And the best gift I can give someone is showing them where they're vulnerable before the stakes get real." I was close enough to hear this, pretending to check my phone. She glanced at me when she said it, just for a second. The workshop was good. Better than good. Maren was a better teacher than I'd expected, breaking down complex strategies into manageable pieces, asking questions that made you think instead of just lecturing. She gave examples from real rounds, walked through the mechanics of setting up linguistic traps, explained why certain phrasings worked and others didn't. During the lunch break, I stood in line for mediocre sandwiches and tried to figure out if I was imagining the fact that Maren kept looking at me. Not staring, just these quick glances when she thought I wasn't paying attention, the kind of look you give someone when you're trying to figure something out. I was not imagining it. After lunch, we broke into smaller groups for practice rounds. Maren circulated, giving feedback, and when she got to my group, she watched my cross-examination and then crouched down next to my chair to give notes. She smelled like something clean and understated. Not perfume exactly, maybe just laundry detergent or shampoo. She said, "You're leading the witness too much. Let them hang themselves. You're handing them the rope but then telling them how to tie the knot." I said, "That's a deeply morbid metaphor." She grinned. "Debate is a blood sport. Embrace it." Her hand was resting on the back of my chair, close enough that I could feel the warmth of it without actually touching. I wondered if she noticed. I wondered if I was losing my mind. I wondered if there was a polite way to ask someone if they were aware they were causing you to have a minor internal crisis just by existing in your proximity. The workshop ended at 4. People filtered out slowly, thanking Maren, exchanging contact information. I hung back, pretending to pack my bag very slowly, and when the room was almost empty, she walked over. "So?" she said. "Was it helpful?" "Very," I said. "I actually learned things, which wasn't what I expected." "What did you expect?" "Honestly? I thought you were going to spend 4 hours telling us how to be more like you." She laughed. "That would be insufferable." "Little bit," I agreed. She leaned against the table next to me, arms crossed. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Why did you come?" I looked at her. She was watching me with that same evaluating expression from the tournament, and I realized she actually wanted to know. This wasn't small talk. I could have lied. Probably should have. Instead, I said, "Because you invited me, and I wanted to know why." "Why I invited you?" "Yes." She was quiet for a moment, and I watched her think, watched the small shift in her expression that meant she was deciding something. Finally, she said, "Because I thought you were good, and I wanted to see if I was right. And I was right. The room felt smaller suddenly, or maybe I was just very aware of how close we were standing. She was looking at me like I was a problem she wanted to solve, or maybe a question she hadn't finished asking. I should have said thank you. I should have made a joke. I should have done anything other than just stand there staring at her like an idiot. She cleared her throat, pushed off the table. I should finish cleaning up, but if you're free, there's a coffee shop 2 blocks from here that's open until 6. I could use caffeine after talking for 6 hours straight. It took me a full 3 seconds to realize she was asking me to get coffee with her. Another 2 seconds to remember how to speak. Yeah. Okay. That sounds good. We walked there together, and the space between us felt charged with something I couldn't name. She asked me about my major, and I asked about hers. And we fell into that easy rhythm of getting to know you conversation that somehow didn't feel rehearsed. She wanted to know why I'd chosen political science, and I told her about a town hall meeting I'd attended in high school, where I watched a woman argue so passionately for funding a domestic violence shelter that the entire room shifted. She told me about watching her mom get screwed over in a divorce because she couldn't afford good representation, about being 14 and realizing that the law wasn't neutral, it was just expensive. That's when I decided, she said. I was going to be the kind of lawyer who made sure people didn't get destroyed just because they couldn't pay for defense. That's depressingly idealistic for a future corporate lawyer, I said. She laughed. Who said I'm going corporate? You're pre-law at an expensive school? You run 3 campus organizations. You have future Supreme Court justice written all over you. Corporate is where people like you end up. People like me, she repeated, and there was something in her tone I couldn't read. What kind of person do you think I am? I looked at her. This woman who'd beaten me so badly I'd considered quitting debate, who'd then invited me to a workshop and told me I was worth the effort, who was now walking beside me asking questions like she actually cared about the answers. I think you're the kind of person who always knows the right answer and has to live with how lonely that is. She stopped walking. We were half a block from the coffee shop, standing under a tree that was just starting to bud. She looked at me with an expression I couldn't parse, something between surprise and recognition. That's the saddest thing anyone's said to me in months, she said finally, and also possibly the most accurate. I didn't know what to say to that. She started walking again, and I followed, and we didn't talk about it further. The coffee shop was small, crowded, warm, the kind of place with mismatched furniture and local art on the walls, and a chalkboard menu that changed daily. We got a table near the window, wedged between a girl with bright pink hair working on a laptop, and 2 guys having an animated discussion about Kant. She ordered black coffee. I got something with too much milk and sugar, and we sat there as afternoon bled into evening. We talked about law school and career plans and whether debate was actually useful preparation for anything or just an elaborate form of academic masochism. She told me about her brother, who was 21 and trying to make it as a jazz musician in New York, and drove her absolutely insane with his complete lack of practical planning. I told her about my roommate Becca, about how she'd basically adopted me sophomore year when I was struggling and had been dragging me toward functionality ever since. She sounds like a good friend, Maren said. She is. She also thinks I'm completely insane for being here. Here as in this coffee shop? Or here as in spending your Saturday learning debate strategy? Both, I said. But mostly the coffee shop part. Why does she think you're insane? Because I haven't been able to stop thinking about you, I didn't say. Because you humiliated me and I somehow developed a fixation on you instead of a reasonable grudge, I didn't say. Because I'm sitting across from you trying to act normal while every cell in my body is hyper-aware of the fact that you're 3 feet away, I definitely didn't say. Because I have a terrible track record of making reasonable decisions, I said instead. That's refreshingly honest. I'm trying this new thing where I don't lie to people who could probably tell anyway. She leaned forward slightly, elbows on the table. Can I tell you something? Sure. I almost didn't invite you to the workshop. I blinked. Why not? Because I knew if I did, I'd end up doing something like this. She gestured between us. Sitting in a coffee shop trying to figure out if you're feeling even a fraction of what I'm feeling, which is probably crossing about 17 professional boundaries. My heart was doing something aerobic. What are you feeling? She looked at me, and the noise of the coffee shop seemed to fade. Like I made a very good decision and a very complicated one at the same time. The light outside was fading, turning the sky purple and orange, and inside the coffee shop it was golden and slightly too warm. Her sleeve was pushed up, and I could see a thin silver bracelet around her wrist, delicate and probably expensive. I wanted to ask where she got it. I wanted to ask what her favorite book was, what she thought about at 3 a.m, whether she wrote my name in the fog on her window because she couldn't sleep, or because she was testing what it felt like to make it real. Instead, I said, I'm glad you invited me. Yeah? Yeah. We stayed until the barista started wiping down tables with the pointed energy of someone whose shift was ending. Outside, the temperature had dropped. Maren offered to drive me back to my car, which was sensible, and also meant more time in an enclosed space with her. She drove me back to my car. The campus was quiet, evening settling in. She pulled into the parking spot next to mine and turned off the engine, and for a moment neither of us moved. Thank you, I said, for the workshop and the coffee. This was really nice. It was, she said, and there was something in her voice I couldn't quite read. I should have gotten out. Instead, I said, Can I ask you something? Of course. Why are you being so nice to me? She looked at me, and in the dim light I couldn't quite read her expression. Do you want the polite answer or the honest one? My heart was doing something complicated. Honest? She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, Because I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since that round, and I couldn't figure out why. And then you showed up today, and I realized it's because you're brilliant and stubborn and you argue like you're trying to save the world, and I find that completely unbearable in the best possible way. I stopped breathing. She kept going. And I know that's probably wildly inappropriate to say, and if I've misread this situation, I'm sorry. But I needed you to know that this isn't mentorship or networking or whatever professional label makes it acceptable. I asked you here because I wanted to spend time with you. I managed to remember how to inhale. You haven't misread anything. No? No. She smiled, and it was different from every other smile I'd seen on her. Relieved, maybe. Uncertain. She said, That's good, because I was about 30 seconds away from talking myself out of saying any of that. I've been trying not to think about you for 3 weeks. How's that going? Terribly. Good, she said. I'd hate to be suffering alone. I said, What happens now? I don't know, she said. I'm graduating in 2 months. You're a junior. I'll probably end up at law school somewhere that isn't here. This is complicated. So we do nothing? She looked at me, and I watched her decide something. No. We do something stupid and complicated and probably a terrible idea. Like what? She reached over and very carefully tucked a piece of my hair behind my ear. Her hand lingered for half a second, her thumb brushing my cheekbone. Like admitting that I want to see you again, she said, and that I have no idea how to do this without making it weird. It's already weird, I said. Fair point. Then her phone buzzed. She glanced at it and said, I have to go. My roommate locked herself out again. Reality crashed back. I nodded. Right, of course. I got out of her car. She rolled down the window and said, "Iris? Yeah? Next tournament is in 3 weeks. You're going, right?" "Probably." "Good. I'll see you there." She drove away, and I stood in the parking lot trying to figure out what had just happened. That night, I lay in bed replaying every word she'd said. I told Becca nothing, which she noticed immediately, but she let it go. I fell asleep sometime after midnight and dreamed about debate rounds and coffee shops, and the way her voice sounded when she said my name. 3 days later, her roommate told mine that Maren had been writing my name in the fog on her dorm window at 2 in the morning. When I heard that, I sat very still for a long time. Then I texted Becca, who I'd finally told everything, and said, "I think I'm completely screwed." She wrote back immediately, "Yeah, but like, in a good way." I wished I could believe that. The next tournament came faster than I was ready for. Becca and I drove up Thursday night, checked into a hotel that smelled like industrial carpet cleaner and regret, and I spent 2 hours pretending to prep while actually rehearsing 17 different versions of what I'd say if I ran into Maren in a hallway. I didn't have to wait long. Friday morning, registration table, 8:30. The hotel conference center was already packed with debaters picking up folders and name tags, the air thick with nervous energy and mediocre coffee. I was standing in line with Becca, both of us still half asleep, when I saw her. She was standing near the coffee station wearing navy trousers and a cream sweater, hair in that same effortless bun, talking to her partner Simone. The morning light from the tall windows caught her profile, and I had this visceral memory of sitting in her car, her hand on my face, the careful way she'd kissed me. I saw her before she saw me, which gave me approximately 4 seconds to panic about whether my shirt was wrinkled and whether I should have worn the other shoes and why I was suddenly 15 years old about this. Becca nudged me. "That's her, isn't it?" "Yeah. She's watching you." I looked up. She was. Our eyes met across the crowded registration area, and her expression did something complicated. Surprise, recognition, something else I couldn't name. She said something to Simone, who glanced my direction with obvious curiosity, and then she excused herself and walked over. The crowd seemed to part for her. Or maybe I was just hyper-aware of her movement through space, the way she navigated around clusters of people with easy confidence. She stopped about 2 feet away, close enough to be intentional, but not so close that anyone would think it was unusual. "Hi," she said, and her voice was careful, like she was testing the temperature of something. "Hi. You came. I said I would." She smiled, and it was smaller than the ones from the workshop, more careful. I wasn't sure if probably meant probably or if it was the kind of probably that actually means no. "It meant probably," I said, which apparently meant yes. We stood there in the middle of the registration area while people flowed around us picking up brackets and name tags. She looked like she wanted to say something, then thought better of it, then decided to say it anyway. "Can we talk?" she asked. "Later, I mean. After rounds." My heart did something aerobic. "Yeah, okay." "Okay." She glanced back at Simone, who was watching us with poorly concealed interest. "I should go, but I'm glad you're here." She walked away before I could respond, and I stood there holding my registration packet like an idiot until Becca appeared at my elbow and said, "Was that her?" "Yes." "She's taller than I expected." "I know." "You're blushing." "I'm not." "You absolutely are." I was. We hit our first round at 9, lost respectably, won our second, lost our third to a team from Connecticut who had clearly been doing this since they were in utero. By lunch, I was exhausted and anxious and couldn't stop scanning every room for Maren's face. I saw her twice from a distance, once leaving a round and once in the hallway talking to a judge. Both times she was in debate mode, sharp and focused, and I remembered with painful clarity what it felt like to be on the receiving end of that attention. Our afternoon rounds were better. We won 2, lost 1 on a technicality that Becca was still furious about by the time we broke for dinner. The tournament was doing a catered thing in the main ballroom, which meant 200 debaters crammed into a space designed for half that, picking at pasta that had been sitting under heat lamps too long. I found a table in the corner with Becca and 2 people from a team we'd competed against earlier. Maren was across the room with her team, and I was trying very hard not to look at her every 30 seconds when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. It's Maren. Got your number from the roster. Hope that's not weird. Meet me outside in 10? I stared at the message for long enough that Becca leaned over and said, "What?" "Nothing." "Liar." I showed her the phone. She read it, looked at me, said, "Go. We're eating. You've been pushing pasta around your plate for 15 minutes. Go." I went. Outside, the air was cold and sharp, early spring trying to decide if it was still winter. My breath made clouds in the air. The tournament was at a university in Vermont. All stone buildings and dramatic architecture, Gothic revival mixed with more modern additions. I found Maren standing near a courtyard fountain that wasn't running yet for the season, its basin empty except for a few dead leaves. She was facing away from me, shoulders slightly hunched against the cold, and I realized she was nervous. Actually nervous, in a way I'd never seen her look before. Maren Hollis, who destroyed opponents in cross-examination without breaking a sweat, was nervous about talking to me. She turned when she heard me approach. "Hi. Hi. You got my number from the roster?" "I did. I hope that's okay. I could have asked you directly, but that felt like it required more confidence than I currently have." She laughed, but it sounded uncertain. "Which is not something I'm used to admitting." I moved closer, close enough to see her breath in the cold air. "You don't seem like someone who lacks confidence." "I'm very good at faking it in specific contexts," she said. "Debate rounds, presentations, anything with clear rules and objectives. This is not one of those contexts. This is me standing in a cold courtyard about to say things I've been rehearsing for 3 weeks and still getting wrong." We stood there for a moment. She had her hands in her pockets, and she was doing this thing where she rocked slightly on her heels, and it was so unexpectedly human that I felt something in my chest crack open. She wasn't the untouchable debate captain right now. She was just a person trying to figure out how to say something that mattered. "I've been thinking about what I said," she started, "in the car, about wanting to see you again." "Okay. And I think I need to be more honest about what I actually want, because I have this tendency to be indirect when things matter, which is deeply ironic, given that I make a living being precise with language. But I get careful when stakes are high. And you..." She stopped, took a breath. "You feel like high stakes." My heart was hammering. I wanted to say something, but I was afraid if I interrupted, I'd break whatever she was building toward. "I like you," she said, and the words came out in a rush. And I know, that's a painfully simple way to put it, but I've been trying to find a more sophisticated phrasing for 3 weeks, and I keep coming back to that. I like you. I like talking to you. I like the way you argue even when I'm arguing back. I like that you called me lonely when we barely knew each other and you were completely right, and I'm still not sure how you saw that when no one else ever does. I think about you at 2 in the morning when I should be sleeping, and apparently I write your name in condensation on windows, which my roommate will not stop mocking me for. The courtyard felt smaller suddenly, or maybe the world had narrowed to just the 2 of us standing in the cold. I could hear traffic from somewhere beyond the campus walls, distant and unimportant. I felt like I'd forgotten how to breathe properly. She told my roommate, "I know, I'm sorry about that. It wasn't meant to be public knowledge, it was just me being pathetic at 2 a.m. "I don't think it's pathetic." "No? No. I think it's the best thing anyone's told me in months." She looked at me then, really looked at me, and the expression on her face was so open and vulnerable that I wanted to memorize it. "I graduate in 8 weeks," she said. And I don't know where I'll end up for law school, and this is complicated in about 17 different ways, but I can't stop thinking that I'd regret it forever if I didn't at least try. Try what? This. Us. Whatever this could be if we let it. The fountain wasn't running, but I could hear water somewhere, probably a pipe or runoff from melting snow. The courtyard was empty except for us, and the light from the buildings made everything look soft and slightly unreal. I want that too, I said. Yeah? Yeah. I've wanted it since you told the judge my framework was unenforceable, and I wanted to hate you for it and couldn't. She laughed, and the sound was relieved and genuine. That's possibly the most debate-specific origin story for a relationship I've ever heard. We're very specific people. We are. She took a step closer and then another, and suddenly we were standing close enough that I could see the exact color of her eyes in the weird courtyard lighting, gray-green with darker flecks. Can I take you to dinner tomorrow? After finals. Somewhere that isn't a hotel conference room with heat lamp pasta. Yes. Good. That's good. She reached out and very carefully, like she was testing whether this was allowed, she took my hand. Her fingers were cold from being outside, and mine probably were too, but the contact still felt like it carried a charge. I should let you get back to your team. You should. Neither of us moved. I'm really glad you came to this tournament, she said. Me too. She squeezed my hand once, let go, and walked back toward the building. I stood there in the cold courtyard for 5 more minutes trying to remember how to act like a normal person who hadn't just had their entire emotional landscape rearranged. When I got back inside, Becca took one look at my face and said, "Oh, you're in deep." Shut up. I'm just saying, you have the expression of someone who just got proposed to or witnessed a miracle. What happened? She asked me to dinner. And? And I said yes. And? And I'm completely screwed. Becca grinned. Yeah, but like, in a good way. I shoved her, but I was smiling. Saturday was semifinals and finals. Becca and I didn't make it past quarters, which was better than we'd done all season and still felt like a failure. We watched finals from the audience, and Maren's team was in it, and watching her compete when I wasn't the target was a completely different experience. She was brilliant, controlled and sharp and devastating. But there was something else there too, something I was starting to recognize. The care underneath the precision, the way she framed her arguments not just to win but to teach. They won, obviously. The judge's decision wasn't even close. After the award ceremony, people filtered out toward the parking lot, and I was helping Becca load our stuff into her car when Maren appeared. "Hi," she said. "Ready for dinner?" Becca looked between us and said, "I'll drive myself back. Iris can get a ride with you." I started to protest, but Becca was already in the driver's seat with the engine running. She waved, mouthed, "You're welcome," and pulled out. Maren watched her go and said, "I like your friend. She's aggressively helpful. That seems like a good quality in a friend." We ended up at a small Italian place 20 minutes from campus, the kind of restaurant with checkered tablecloths and candles in wine bottles and exactly 3 things on the menu. The air smelled like garlic and bread, warm and welcoming after the cold outside. We sat in a corner booth, ordered wine that was significantly better than the tournament box variety, and suddenly, I didn't know what to say. This was different from the coffee shop, from the workshop. This felt like a date, capital D, with all the pressure that implied. "You're nervous," she said. "So are you." Fair point. She took a sip of wine, set the glass down carefully. Should we acknowledge that this is terrifying or pretend we're both completely normal about it? I think acknowledging might be safer. Less chance of me saying something weird if we're both already admitting this is weird. She laughed, and some of the tension broke. "Okay, I'll go first." I'm terrified that I'm going to say something that makes you realize I'm actually deeply boring, and you've built me up in your head into someone more interesting than I actually am. That's not going to happen. You don't know that. I do, actually. Because I've seen you be brilliant, and I've seen you be vulnerable, and both versions are interesting. You're not performing for me right now. You're just being yourself. And that's what I wanted. She looked at me with this expression I couldn't quite read. You're good at this. At what? Saying true things that make people feel seen. Do you know you do that? I didn't, actually. I just say what I'm thinking. Most people don't. They edit, they hedge, they say what they think the other person wants to hear. You just cut straight through to the honest thing. She leaned forward slightly. It's disarming. Is that good or bad? Good. Definitely good. Scary, but good. The waiter brought bread, and we ordered, and then we fell into conversation that felt easier now that we'd acknowledged the awkwardness. She told me about her plans for law school, about the schools she was waiting to hear from, about how terrified she was of not being good enough, even though her entire academic record suggested otherwise. I know it's irrational, she said, but there's this voice in my head that keeps saying I only got this far because I worked harder than everyone else, not because I'm actually smart enough. Like eventually someone's going to figure out I don't belong, and I'll get kicked out. That's imposter syndrome. I know what it is. Knowing doesn't make it go away. What does make it go away? Evidence, usually. Enough successes that the voice gets quieter, but it never fully disappears. She tore off a piece of bread, didn't eat it. What about you? What's your thing? My thing? The fear that keeps you up at night. The thing you're convinced you're failing at even when you're probably not. I thought about it. I'm terrified I'm going to wake up at 30 and realize I spent my 20s chasing things I thought I was supposed to want, instead of figuring out what I actually want. Like I'm on autopilot following a script someone else wrote. Have you figured out what you actually want yet? Some things. I looked at her. This, for instance. I want this. Her expression softened. Yeah? Yeah. We talked for 3 hours. The restaurant filled and emptied around us. We worked through appetizers and entrees and dessert. And every time I thought we'd run out of things to say, something new would come up. She told me about her family, about her mom who worked 3 jobs to keep them afloat after the divorce, about her brother who frustrated her because he was so talented and so irresponsible. I told her about my parents' divorce, quieter and more amicable than hers, but still this fault line that ran through my childhood. We talked about books we'd read and movies we'd hated and the specific way that academic pressure turns you into someone who can't relax. At one point, she said, "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Why did you keep coming back? To debate, I mean. You said you almost quit 6 times. I thought about it. Tried to find the honest answer underneath all the easy ones. Because I'm terrible at letting go of things that hurt me. And because every time I got better at something, even incrementally, it felt like proof that I wasn't just fumbling through life hoping no one noticed I had no idea what I was doing. She nodded slowly, and I could see her processing, fitting that answer into her understanding of me. That's painfully relatable. What about you? Why do you do it? Because I'm good at it, she said. Which is a terrible reason, but also the honest one. I spent a lot of my childhood feeling powerless, watching my mom get destroyed by systems she couldn't navigate, and debate was the first thing that made me feel like I could actually control an outcome through sheer competence. It's a control thing. Very healthy, very well adjusted. We're a mess, I said. We really are. She smiled, and it was warm and genuine. But at least we're self-aware about it. The restaurant was closing. We were the last table. The waiter brought the check with the kind of pointed patience that suggested we should have left an hour ago. Maren paid over my protests, and we walked outside into a night that had gotten significantly colder. "I should drive you back to your hotel," she said. "You should." We got in her car and she turned the heat on, and neither of us moved to leave the parking lot. The windows started to fog from our breathing. "I had a really good time tonight," she said. "Me too. I don't want this to end." "It doesn't have to." She looked at me, and in the dim light from the dashboard I could see her deciding something. "I got into Columbia," she said, "for law school. I found out last week." "That's incredible. Congratulations." "It's in New York." "I know where Columbia is. It's 4 hours from your school." "I know how far it is, Maren." She was gripping the steering wheel even though the car wasn't moving. "I'm trying to figure out if this is fair, to start something when I know I'm leaving. Do I get a say in what's fair to me?" "Of course." "Then stop deciding for me what I can handle. I'm an adult. I can make terrible decisions all by myself." She laughed, surprised. "Calling this a terrible decision is not the reassurance I was hoping for. I'm saying I want to try anyway, even if it's complicated. Even if you're leaving. I'd rather have complicated with you than uncomplicated with someone I don't think about at 2 in the morning." She turned in her seat to face me fully. "You think about me at 2 in the morning? You write my name in window fog. We're even." She reached over and took my hand, and this time her fingers weren't cold. "I want to kiss you," she said. "But I also want to do this right, and I'm not sure what right looks like." My heart was doing something gymnastics adjacent. "What do you want right to look like?" "I don't know. Something where I'm not kissing you in a restaurant parking lot at midnight after our second real conversation." "Third," I said. "The mixer counts." "Third," she corrected. "My point stands." "What if I want you to kiss me in a restaurant parking lot at midnight?" She looked at me, and I watched her resolve crack. "You're not making this easier." "I'm not trying to." She leaned closer, and I could feel my pulse in my throat. Her hand came up to my face, fingers tracing the line of my jaw so carefully it almost hurt. "Tell me if this is a bad idea," she said. "It's probably a bad idea." "That's not the same as telling me to stop." "I don't want you to stop." She kissed me, and it was soft and careful, and nothing like what I'd imagined. Her lips were warm, and she tasted like wine, and when she pulled back after approximately 4 seconds, she was smiling. "Hi," she said. "Hi. I've been wanting to do that for 5 weeks. You could do it again." She laughed and kissed me again, less carefully this time, her hand sliding into my hair, and I forgot that we were in a car in a parking lot in Vermont in March. I forgot about tournaments and law school and the 4-hour drive between our schools. There was just her mouth and her hand, and the way she made this small sound when I kissed her back harder. We pulled apart eventually, both breathing unevenly, and she rested her forehead against mine. "I should drive you back." "You should." "I'm not going to." "Good." We stayed in that parking lot for another hour, talking and kissing and fogging up the windows completely. And when she finally drove me back to my hotel, it was almost 2 in the morning, and I felt like I'd been awake for 3 days. She walked me to the lobby. "I'll see you soon?" "When?" "I don't know. When's your next free weekend?" 2 weeks. "I'll drive down," she said. "We'll figure it out." She kissed me goodbye in the lobby under fluorescent lights that made everything look slightly sickly, and it was somehow more romantic than any carefully staged moment could have been. I went upstairs and texted Becca. "I'm in so much trouble." She wrote back, "Details, now." I told her everything, and she called me immediately, and we stayed on the phone until 3 a.m. while she oscillated between being thrilled for me and lecturing me about the inevitable complications of dating someone who was graduating. "I know it's complicated," I said. "Do you, though? Because you have a tendency to jump into things and then act surprised when they're exactly as complicated as everyone warned you they'd be." I'm going into this with my eyes open. Your eyes are open, but your brain is on vacation. Rude. Accurate. She wasn't wrong, but I didn't care. The next 2 weeks were a strange combination of normal life and constant distraction. Classes, assignments, debate practice, all of it happening in the background, while I checked my phone every 20 minutes to see if Maren had texted. She did, frequently, these long messages about her day, or something she'd read or a case she was studying. I sent back equally long responses, and we fell into this pattern of basically narrating our lives to each other. She drove down on a Friday. I met her in the parking lot of my dorm, and seeing her get out of her car in jeans and a jacket instead of debate clothes felt surreal. "Hi," she said. "Hi." She kissed me right there in the parking lot, and I heard someone whistle from a window above us. She pulled back, laughing. "Sorry, I've been thinking about doing that for 2 weeks." "I don't mind." We went to dinner, walked around campus, ended up in my dorm room because my roommate was gone for the weekend. We sat on my bed talking until midnight, and at some point talking turned into kissing, and kissing turned into her hands under my shirt, and my hands in her hair. She pulled back, breathing hard. "Is this okay?" "Yes." "You're sure?" "Maren, I'm sure." She kissed me again, slower, her hands tracing patterns on my skin. We took our time, learning what made the other one gasp or arch or grip tighter. Her skin was warm and soft, and when she touched me, I felt like every nerve had been waiting for exactly this. After, we lay tangled together, and she traced lazy patterns on my shoulder. "I should probably ask if you have any regrets," she said. "Do you?" "Not even slightly." "Then neither do I." She stayed the whole weekend. We barely left my room except to get food, and by Sunday night when she had to drive back, I felt like something fundamental had shifted. This wasn't just attraction or infatuation anymore. This was real and solid and terrifying. "I don't want you to leave," I said. "I don't want to leave." "But you have to." "I have to." She kissed me goodbye, promised to text when she got back, told me she'd figure out when she could come down again. I watched her car pull out of the parking lot and felt the distance open up between us like a physical thing. The next 6 weeks were hard. We texted constantly, called when we could, but she was drowning in finals and graduation prep, and I was trying to keep my own grades from imploding. We saw each other once more before graduation, one stolen weekend, where she drove down, and we spent 2 days pretending the calendar wasn't running out. Her graduation was on a Saturday in May. I drove up with Becca. The ceremony was long, and I spent the entire time watching Maren in her cap and gown. When it was over, I found her in the crowd, and she saw me and her entire face changed. She pushed through people to get to me and kissed me right there in front of everyone. When she pulled back, I said, "Congratulations. You came." "Of course I came." Her mom was watching with interest, and Maren turned to her. "Mom, this is Iris." Her mom shook my hand. "The debater. She talks about you constantly." "Mom, I'm just saying." But she was smiling. We went to dinner with her family, and I sat next to Maren, feeling her hand find mine under the table. It felt overwhelmingly normal and terrifying. Later, we walked around campus. She was leaving in a week, moving to New York before law school started. "This is happening," she said. "Yeah. I'm scared." "Of law school?" "Of losing this. Of the distance turning into something we can't fix." I stopped walking. "Look at me." She did. "We're going to figure it out," I said. "It's going to be hard and complicated, and sometimes we're going to want to give up, but we're going to figure it out." "How are you so sure?" "Because you write my name in window fog at 2 a.m., and I drove 3 hours to watch a boring graduation ceremony, and that means something." She kissed me, and it tasted like promise and fear and hope. The summer was strange. She moved to New York and I stayed home working retail. We texted constantly, FaceTimed every night, visited twice. It wasn't enough, but it was what we had. Law school started in August and everything got harder. She was drowning in reading and I was back at school for my senior year. The 4-hour distance felt impossible. We fought about stupid things, made up over video calls, went weeks without seeing each other. In October, I drove up to see her, and we had the worst fight we'd ever had. She was stressed, and I felt neglected, and we said things we didn't mean. I drove home crying, convinced it was over. She called me at 3 a.m. I'm sorry. I'm sorry too. I don't know how to do this. Neither do I. But I don't want to stop trying. Neither do I. We figured it out slowly through trial and error and too many late-night conversations. We learned how to communicate across distance, how to make time when there wasn't any, how to choose each other even when it was hard. In December, I applied to grad schools in New York. I got into NYU for political science. When I called to tell her, she cried, "You're coming here? I'm coming there." I graduated in May. She was there, in the audience, and when I walked across the stage, I found her face and smiled. After, she took me to dinner at the same Italian restaurant in Vermont, the one with checkered tablecloths. "I have something for you," she said. She handed me a small box. Inside was a key. "It's to my apartment," she said. "I want you to move in with me, if you want." I looked at her, this woman who had destroyed me in a debate round and then put me back together. Yes. Yeah? Yeah. We moved in together in August. Her apartment was small and perfect. We fought about dishes and groceries and the thermostat. We figured out how to live together, how to build a life together. On a cold night in October, I woke up at 2 a.m. to find her side of the bed empty. I found her in the living room by the window. The glass was fogged, and she was writing something with her finger. I watched her trace my name in the condensation. "You know I can see you, right?" I said. She jumped. "How long have you been standing there?" "Long enough? You still do that?" She looked embarrassed. "Sometimes, when I can't sleep." I walked over and wrapped my arms around her. "I'm right here." "I know." She leaned back against me. "It's just nice to see it written out. Makes it feel real." I turned her around and kissed her. "It is real." "I know." "Do you?" "Because you destroyed me in front of everyone and then put my name in window fog, and now we share an apartment and I still can't quite believe this is real." She smiled. "I can't believe it either. I thought I'd scared you away that first day." "You did. I just came back anyway." "Best decision you ever made." "Second best," I said. "First was saying yes to that workshop. That was me inviting you." "Fine. Best decision I ever made was saying yes." She kissed me, and outside my name was slowly fading from the glass. But it didn't matter because she was here, and I was here, and we'd figured it out. "Come back to bed," I said. "In a minute." "What are you doing?" She turned back to the window and wrote something else. 2 words next to where my name had been. "Forever. Hopefully," she said. I read it and felt something in my chest crack open. That's deeply sappy. I know. I love it. I know. I pulled her back to bed, and we fell asleep tangled together. And when I woke up, the words on the window were gone, but she was still there, and that felt like the most important thing. Years later, I would tell people we met at a debate tournament. I'd say she destroyed me in cross-examination, and I couldn't stop thinking about her. They'd laugh and say it was romantic in a weird way, and I'd agree. But the truth was simpler. She saw something in me worth the effort. She wrote my name in window fog because she couldn't stop thinking about me. She chose me, and I chose her back, and we built something real. The debate was just the beginning. Everything after was us figuring out how to be devastating and gentle at the same time, how to argue with someone you love without destroying them, how to write someone's name in fog and mean it as a promise. We figured it out eventually. We're still figuring it out. But that's the thing about slow burn romance. It never really ends. It just keeps burning, steady and warm, year after year, until you can't remember what your life looked like before the fire started.